The air within the last haven was thick with tension as Captain Sarah Rodriguez paced back and forth in the makeshift command center. The once military base, surrounded by towering walls and barricades, now served as a fragile sanctuary for the diverse group of survivors. Dr. Emily Turner, the group's resilient doctor, examined a map, while Jake Miller, the resourceful mechanic, reinforced the barricades with whatever materials he could scavenge. The school teacher, Lisa Thompson, tried to comfort a group of children huddled in a corner, using a tattered book to distract them from the eerie moans of the undead just beyond the walls. Meanwhile, the mysterious stranger, known only as Silas, stood in the shadows, his past shrouded in secrecy. His piercing gaze hinted at a troubled history that had brought him to the last haven. Captain Rodriguez gathered the survivors for a briefing, her voice firm but weary. "We've held our ground so far, but we can't ignore the fact that supplies are running low," she announced, glancing at Jake, who nodded in agreement. "We need a plan. We can't stay here forever." Dr. Turner interjected, "I've been working on a makeshift vaccine. If we can find a way to produce it on a larger scale, we might have a chance to reclaim some of the cities overrun by the undead." Silas, his eyes locked on the horizon, spoke up for the first time. "I've been out there. There's a group of outcasts led by a man named Ezekiel. They've managed to survive without barricading themselves in. Maybe we should consider a more nomadic approach." As the survivors debated their next move, the distant sounds of gunfire echoed through the air. Captain Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. "We're not alone," she said. "We need to be cautious. Silas, can you trust this Ezekiel?" Silas hesitated before replying, "Trust is a luxury we can't afford. But I've seen Ezekiel control the undead, like their puppets. We might need him." The survivors faced a critical decision: fortify their last haven, venture out to produce the vaccine, or align themselves with the mysterious Ezekiel and his unique abilities. Each choice carried its own risks, and the fate of the last haven hung in the balance as the undead pressed against the walls, hungry for the taste of the survivors' humanity. Deep within the bowels of an abandoned underground laboratory, Dr. Richard Foster moved with calculated precision among vials, computers, and eerie green lighting. The air was thick with the stench of decay, a stark contrast to the sterile environment in which Foster conducted his twisted experiments. A bank of monitors displayed footage of the undead subjects, their movements eerily coordinated. Foster, with wild eyes and disheveled hair, reveled in his discoveries. "I've cracked the code," he muttered to himself, a manic grin spreading across his face. Unbeknownst to the survivors in the last haven, Foster had successfully developed a method to control the undead. His experiments had given birth to a legion of enhanced zombies with newfound strength, speed, and even a crude form of intelligence. The rogue scientist, driven by an insatiable thirst for power and recognition, believed he could reshape the world in his image. As the survivors grappled with their own challenges, Foster prepared to unleash his creations upon the unsuspecting world. The hidden laboratory, protected by layers of security, became a breeding ground for an army of supercharged undead. Foster's ultimate goal was to establish himself as the ruler of a new order, where he alone controlled the fate of both the living and the dead. The enhanced zombies, now exhibiting terrifying new abilities, banged against their reinforced enclosures, hungry for the taste of freedom. Foster, oblivious to the chaos unfolding beyond his secret haven, reveled in the madness of his creation. Little did he know that the survivors in the last haven were not the only force standing in the way of his apocalyptic ambitions. As the tensions between the survivors and the nomadic outcasts reached a boiling point, the rogue scientist's plans were set in motion. The world teetered on the brink of a new kind of horror, where the undead were not just mindless threats but formidable weapons in the hands of a madman. The fate of humanity hung in the balance as the three parties hurtled towards a collision course, each holding a key to the unfolding catastrophe. In the vast expanse of the desolate wasteland, Ezekiel led his nomadic outcasts through the unforgiving terrain. Clad in tattered clothing and armed with makeshift weapons, the group had learned to navigate the dangers of the undead and rival survivor bands that roamed the barren landscape. Ezekiel, a figure of mystery and charisma, kept his true abilities hidden from the prying eyes of his followers. As the outcasts neared the last haven, whispers of a fortified sanctuary reached Ezekiel's ears. Intrigued, he decided to investigate, hoping to find allies in the fight against the ever-growing horde of undead. Little did he know that the survivors within the last haven were grappling with their own challenges and the looming threat of Dr. Foster's experiments. Upon crossing paths with the survivors, Ezekiel's uncanny ability to control and communicate with the undead became apparent. The once hostile creatures seemed to heed his commands, parting ways to allow the outcasts safe passage. Captain Sarah Rodriguez, initially wary, saw potential in an alliance with Ezekiel and his unique skill. However, as the survivors and outcasts shared their stories, the truth about Dr. Foster's experiments emerged. Ezekiel, torn between his desire to aid humanity and the temptation of dominating the undead, faced a moral dilemma that would shape the fate of the last haven and the world beyond. Meanwhile, Dr. Foster, unaware of Ezekiel's existence, continued his march toward chaos. The enhanced undead, now unleashed upon the world, posed a threat not only to the survivors but also to Ezekiel and his outcasts. The lines between ally and enemy blurred as the deadly game of survival, betrayal, and the struggle for power intensified. As the eclipse of the damned cast its shadow over the three parties, choices had to be made, alliances forged, and sacrifices accepted. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and each group held a crucial piece of the puzzle. In this post-apocalyptic drama, the boundaries between friend and foe became indistinguishable, and the survivors, outcasts, and rogue scientist hurtled toward a collision that would determine the future of a world plunged into darkness. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape as the three parties stood on the brink of convergence. Ezekiel, haunted by the knowledge of Dr. Foster's experiments and the potential consequences of his own abilities, sought counsel from his most trusted companions. A heated debate ensued within the ranks of the outcasts, some urging cooperation with the survivors, while others saw an opportunity for dominance over both the living and the undead. Back in the last haven, Captain Sarah Rodriguez grappled with the information about Ezekiel. Trusting a man with control over the undead was a precarious decision, yet the looming threat of Dr. Foster's enhanced zombies forced her to consider desperate alliances. Dr. Emily Turner, the group's voice of reason, advocated for a cautious approach, wary of the potential repercussions of striking a deal with Ezekiel. As tensions mounted, Dr. Foster's enhanced undead closed in on the last haven. The once mindless creatures moved with a calculated purpose, a result of the mad scientist's unholy experiments. The survivors' defenses were put to the ultimate test, with Jake Miller working tirelessly to fortify the base and Lisa Thompson doing her best to keep the children calm. In the hidden laboratory, Dr. Foster monitored the chaos he had unleashed. Blissfully unaware of Ezekiel's existence, he reveled in the havoc caused by his creations. The rogue scientist, oblivious to the impending collision of forces, continued to believe that he alone held the reins of power in this new world. Ezekiel, burdened by the weight of his decisions, made his way to the last haven. The moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape as the nomadic outcasts approached the fortified walls. A tense silence settled, broken only by the distant moans of the undead. The eclipse of the damned had reached its zenith. The survivors, outcasts, and rogue scientists stood at the crossroads of humanity's destiny. In this grim theater of survival, alliances would be forged and broken, sacrifices would be made, and the true nature of each party would be laid bare. As the first confrontation loomed, the lines between friend and foe blurred even further, and the world awaited the resolution of this deadly dance in the shadows.